our One Thing monthly webinar. Every single month, we sit down with a best-selling author whose book makes an impression on us. It says to us that this is something that not only do we believe is aligned with the one thing, but something that we feel called to share with you because we believe it will help you achieve extraordinary results in your life. And today is certainly no exception. The person that you are going to meet and see on screen is somebody who has become a friend over the past few years. Her ideas have made a big impact, not only in my life, but in the lives of, gosh, probably hundreds of thousands of people at this point. For those of you who have been listening to the One Thing podcast, she originally came out in episode 100. It is one of the most downloaded episodes of all time on our show. And when we sat down and said, if we could only have one person on the webinar for this month, who would it be? And it was none other than the creator behind Fierce Conversations, Susan Scott. So Susan, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's just a real privilege to spend time with you and everybody who's listening. And I promise at the end of this to share the one thing that I want everybody to take away from our time together.
I would love that. I would love that. So I'm curious, and folks, for those of you who are here, this is your time. We want to make this interactive. So if you have questions, go ahead and submit them in the questions box. I've got Kaylin right over here who will be fielding them. And I would love just to get a sense, how many of you have heard the podcast that Susan and I have done? If so, put the number 1 in the questions box. If not, do a number 2. Okay. A lot of 2s. Awesome. Well, we're going to get to point you to that. So when we'll send a recap email out after this, and we'll make sure to include it in that. Susan, what is Fierce Conversations?
Well, I will definitely tell you to kick it off. I do want to give everybody just a heads up. Fierce is located in Seattle, which is the epicenter of the coronavirus. All of our employees are working from home, and I hightailed it to my treehouse on Orcas Island, and I have my dogs with me. And there's one on either side of me right now, and I hope they don't bark. But if they do, that's what's going on, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it.
And by the way, how many of you is this the first time that you're getting to watch an interview with somebody legitimately sitting in a real treehouse?
Yeah. And this is the first time I've done a webinar from the treehouse, so
well,
it probably won't be the last, because technology is wonderful when it works. So I definitely have a topic that I want to focus on today, but first I want to establish a few key ideas, and you're going to see me glancing over to my right from time to time, because I've made some notes to make sure that I stay on track and that I share the most important things with you. So a few basics. One is that if you look at your life right now, just all of the results that you have going on, I mean, the ones that you love, the ones you don't love, the ones you're sort of about, and you ask yourself, well, how did I end up with these results today? I would suggest that you arrived here one conversation at a time, probably one successful conversation, a few failed conversations, and the most dangerous of all, the most costly of all, some missing conversations. Because we're really navigating our lives and our careers and our personal relationships one conversation at a time. And I have a little dog tag that I wear it says 1C @T, and it stands for one conversation at a time. And when I put it on in the morning, it's a reminder to take it that way. So another basic idea that I want you to consider is that our most valuable currency is not money, although it is very nice to have some of that and necessary. But our most valuable currency is relationship. It's that emotional capital. And every single conversation that we have with someone or a whole group of people, like the one I'm having with you today, is either enriching that relationship, harming that relationship, or just kind of flatlining the relationship, so there's not a whole lot of point. So really, relationships are key, and connecting with people at a deeper level is very, very important, and is a lot about what we teach. I think if you want to be a great leader, a great human being, you must gain the capacity to connect with the people who are important to you at work and at home at a deep level or
Hmm.
lower. And that doesn't happen via email and text and technology. That happens, well, face to face. And technology is helping us with that.
You
So,
just said something, Susan, that I think is worth repeating. You said
yeah,
you need to have these conversations or lower your aim.
lower your aim. I mean, if you
What
want
do
to
you
be a
mean?
great, if you want to be a great leader or a really great parent or a great partner, a great human being, great, you must learn how to connect with people at a deep level or lower your aim. I mean, there are a lot of people who have the title leader, who are in relationship, who are doing all kinds of things, but I don't know that if the people around them were being really honest, they would describe them as great, 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 great. The people who we describe as great are the people who we know are connected to us, who see us, who value us, and who listen to us, and who, when they say, "What are your thoughts?" are really asking. So, you know, yeah, I mean, most of us just go through our lives and we do fairly well. I'm hearing some kind of an echo. Are you hearing that? I don't know what's going on.
I am too.
Funny sound in the
Hold on
back.
one sec.
I don't know what that's about.
Are you muted?
I, I, well, I don't. Can you hear it
All right,
still?
keep going.
All right, I'll keep going.
No.
So, don't know what that is.
Ding.
It's going to be.
Well, welcome to technology, people. This is how it works. We roll with the punches.
We do. Well, I don't hear it right now. You did
All right,
something. I think you
I did
fixed
do.
you.
I put it in here. So keep rolling.
All right. Okay. So, and just to wrap up that one idea, I mean, if you think about a young man who's newly married, and his wife keeps coming to him wanting to talk yet again about the quality of their relationship, and he's so frustrated and confused, and he wonders, why are we having this conversation again? And eventually, if he's paying attention, it dawns on him, this conversation I've been having with my wife is not about the relationship. The conversation is the relationship. And when I first thought of that, heard that, I thought, wow, that is so true. And if we add yet another topic to the list of things we can't talk about, or it wrecks another meeting at work or another weekend at home, then all of the possibilities for that relationship become smaller and smaller and smaller
Mm.
until we even recognize I am making myself quite small in my conversations with people. I'm behaving as if I'm just a space around my shoes. I'm engaged in yet another 3-minute conversation that is so empty of meaning, it crackles. So the conversation is the relationship. And I would say to everybody in an organization, and the relationship creates the culture. I mean,
Mm.
those conversations create the culture. Those relationships create the culture. So, two ideas and one more. So, the first is we're taking it one conversation at a time. Our most valuable currency is relationship. And the third one is that actually all conversations are with myself, and sometimes they involve other people. And what I mean by that is there's a lot going on in our heads all the time. We are interpreting stuff through our own highly personalized context, our own filter. I mean, each one of you is hearing the same words, and each one of you is taking it in and thinking about it and relating it to your life or not, saying, oh, I agree, I don't agree, I like this, whatever. We're constantly evaluating. And that context, those beliefs that we hold, produce our behavior, and our behavior leads to our results. So, our context, what we hold to be true, is absolutely running the show. And this brings me to the topic that I really want to share with you today. There is something that we humans do, and we do it unconsciously. We don't think about it at all. And actually, but I think we actually kind of enjoy it, is we do make up stories about other people and behave as if those stories are true. Um, I can give you some examples of that, where we're constantly misinterpreting. So, and we don't know that we're misinterpreting, and the other person doesn't know what interpretation we have just given quietly and privately to ourselves about anything. So we, and then we look for more evidence that makes us right. And all of this leads to a lack of trust, a lack of respect, a lack of collaboration, and it ends up affecting the bottom line. And it happens at home. I want to give you a couple of examples of this. Um, and so of misinterpretation or interpretation. Let's say you are in a meeting, and let's say Ted is running the meeting, and let's say Amy keeps holding up her hand because she really wants to say something or ask something, and Ted never calls on her. In fact, he doesn't even seem to glance in her direction. And you're thinking, I mean, you're interpreting that. You're making up a story about Ted, and it might be something like, wow, he's misogynistic, he doesn't like Amy, or he doesn't really welcome any feedback or any input. I mean, it would usually be kind of a negative story. um, and here's another example. Let's say you finally get your boss to have lunch with you, and during the lunch, your boss says, hang on, I've got to take this call. Her phone rings, and I've got to take this call. And she steps outside, and she is gone for like 15 minutes. And when she comes back, she's very distracted. And you can tell she's not really paying a whole lot of attention to you and this precious time that you wanted to have with her. And you could make up a story about her. It might go along the lines of, she doesn't value me, she other things are far more important to her. She just agreed to have this lunch with me because she felt like she had to. She didn't really want to spend time with me. I must not be doing very well. I must not be important. That would be an easy interpretation to make. And one more example, and then we'll circle back and see what was really happening. The third one is, you're walking through your office, you're going through customer service, you can hear one of your people absolutely yelling into the phone, and it's clear that he's talking to a client. And you would make up a story. It's like, what the heck? We don't yell at our clients. I mean, even if they're wrong and even if they're a little evil, sometimes we don't yell at our clients. So we've made up this story. And it's really, really sad because um, we could be dead wrong. We could be absolutely dead wrong. But what do? We don't go have the conversation. I mean, it seems to me like the most logical thing that we would think to do when something happens that we're putting a negative interpretation on is we would go and talk to that person, but we don't do it. Why don't we do it? We don't want to be in the room. It reminds me of something Woody Allen said. I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be in the room when it happens. And I think we're like that when we contemplate having some conversations, and we don't have, and at home, somebody would say, okay, what's wrong? And we might say, nothing, nothing's wrong, when there is something wrong, and it just gets really, really quiet. And so if you if you want more about why we don't have the conversation, you can watch my TEDx talk on radical transparency, the case for radical transparency. But it's this fear. We have this great fear. And um, the resolution could have been achieved with a short conversation. It really could have. For example, using the fierce feedback approach, and this is the topic that I really want to share with you. People hate feedback. I mean, if somebody says, I have feedback for you, we usually, our toes curl. We think, oh Lord, what have I done now? What fresh hell is this, as my mother used to say. Feedback has gotten a really bad rap, and it is because the person coming to us has made up a story about us and is pretending that that story is true. They think it is. What other possible interpretation could anybody put on what I just saw? So the fierce approach turns this into a conversation instead of an attack, a criticism. So Rod, you're in the meeting, you see Rod ignoring Amy. And I hope I named her Amy. I don't remember, but let's say I did. Yeah. So we've made up this story, but we need to catch ourselves in the act of making up the story. And instead, after the meeting, go to Rod and say something like, "Hey, Rod, in the meeting, Amy held up her hand a whole bunch of times. She looked like she really wanted to make a point or ask a question, and you really ignored her. Could you tell me what was going on?" And he might say, "Oh, no, don't tell me I did that. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Oh, we've got a newborn at home. I am so sleep deprived. I'm really asleep on my feet. I did not see her hand. And I think the world of Amy. I mean, I think she's brilliant. I'm going to go apologize to her right now and ask her what she wanted to say." Okay, end of conversation. That was the feedback, but you turned it into a question. You asked, this is what I saw. This is what I experienced. What was going on? Let's take the lunch with the boss. Maybe you would say, if you had the courage, maybe you would say, "Hey, can I just ask you something? I mean, this lunch was so important to me to have time with you. And yet, you took a phone call and it was a long phone call, and now you seem really distracted and not here with me. Can you tell me what's going on?" And maybe your boss would say, "I am so sorry. My dog is very ill. She's at the vet right now, and they were running tests, and they were going to tell me whether they felt they could help her or whether it was time to let her go. And my heart's broken, and it did distract me, and I am so sorry because you are very important to me. And since this has eaten into the time, let's reschedule because I want to have a lunch with you where I'm entirely focused." Wouldn't that be wonderful? And we wouldn't walk away having this bad feeling. And the final example, and this really happened to me, I was the person who overheard, not at Fierce, but somewhere else. I overheard an employee yelling, and I said, "Okay, you just got off the phone with a client, right?" "Yeah." "You were yelling, literally yelling into the phone. Can you tell me what was going on?" And he said, "Yeah, that client is deaf. She cannot hear, and she won't wear a hearing aid, and she won't use one of those phones that amplifies the sound. And she's always saying, 'I can't hear you. I speak louder.'" And he says, "It makes me crazy, but that's kind of what I have to do." And and I just found myself laughing. I'm laughing instead of going to other people with the story that I made up about him originally and saying, "Man, I don't know about Jim. He's terrible with customers. He was yelling with customers. He's got an anger problem. We blah 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 blah." And I didn't go talk about Ted after the meeting and say, "Ted really doesn't pay attention to women. He certainly didn't pay attention to Amy. I don't know what's going on between those two, but we didn't do that." And yet that is what we tend to do. We triangulate. I think of triangulation as person A bonds with person B over their mutual loathing of person C, and person C doesn't have a clue. And quite often, in fact, I'm finding 9 out of 10 times, person C did not do anything like what our interpretation was. Not even close. But we latched onto it, and now we're going to go and complain to so and so rather than have the conversation.
So here's what I
yeah.
think is important about this, Susan, and we had a conversation prior to this, whether to hear these ideas about having fierce conversations, to hear ideas about living the one thing. When we hear it, we imagine what it looks like to live it. And in that mind, we establish a bar of living it perfectly. And then when we start going down that journey, what we realize is that how we are living it is not the way we imagined it. We feel this deficit and we feel like we are failing.
Well, and we're not, we're being human. We're human. And I'm always telling people in our trainings, look, do not beat yourself up if at the moment of truth, when you knew you really should have come out from behind yourself into that conversation and made it real, you didn't. You were very careful instead. Don't beat yourself up. Just say, okay, I didn't do that well at all. And so maybe I need to go back to that person, or maybe next time I'm going to be more courageous. I honestly, I sometimes suggest just pick one of the 7 principles of fierce conversations and let it be your focus for the day, and see how well you can do with that. Or take the definition of a fierce conversation, which is one in which we do come out from behind ourselves into our conversations and make them real, and focus on that for the day. See how real you can be. Um, I was watching the Today Show this morning for a little while, and they had a couple on who were were really excited about the effects of microdosing with some psilocybins or whatever they're called, mushrooms. They were using mushrooms, and they were saying it was so amazing because we found ourselves saying things to one another that we kept wondering, why haven't we said these things before? And I thought, oh my God, okay, all right, maybe I hope it doesn't take mushrooms to get you there. Because it's never as bad as we think it's going to be. It's, nobody's going to die. We just really can have these conversations and do so well. And I think, we teach people how to confront when you've given feedback several times and things are just not improving. But I tell you, if you give feedback on a regular basis, including, gosh, I want to tell you what I just really value about you. Something I saw you do today that blew my socks off. That was magnificent. That's feedback. If we give feedback on a regular basis, it's less likely that we will ever need to confront because we're staying current with one
Hmm.
another. And that's important. I mean, the first chapter of my second book, Fierce Leadership, a bold alternative to the worst best practices of business today, is about anonymous feedback. It's deadly. It's horrible. It actually creates more problems than it solves. So I think feedback should be not once or twice a year. It should be just as appropriate all the time. Stay current, face to face, if at all possible. If not, then get on the phone, but do not give feedback unless it's praise. But even that, do not give it via email or text. I mean, tell someone, let them hear your voice, ideally see your face. So I think it's really important. I mean, our clients are always saying to us, we love this, we love this, we love this. And our biggest concern is sustainability. How do we make sure that we are actually doing what we've just learned? We don't want it to just have been a great experience for everybody and then nobody uses it. And so that is probably the most important question a client can ask us. So we have something, we call it Fierce as Lab. We need to live what we're teaching in our company every day to the best of our ability. And when we notice that we're not doing too well, we need to give feedback and ask what's going on. And that's exactly what happened at Fierce. I began to notice that there were some little cliques, where people seemed to be maybe not as respectful and trusting of other groups, as I hoped they would be, department versus department. And I saw a pattern starting to emerge where I would be having a one-to-one with someone and I would say, what's happening with so and so, and they would eventually make some kind of a critical comment about someone else in the company. And I fell into the trap a couple of times, which was, okay, well, tell me tell me what's happening. What did that person do? What did you do? Blah, 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 blah. Until I realized after I'd done that in a week, think I'd had that happen about 3 times. I thought, what the heck? And and I went to them and I said, look, have you talked with that person or with those people? No. Well, why are you talking to me? And I think one of the most important and valuable things we can do as individuals, whether you're in a leadership position or not, it really doesn't matter. That if someone comes to you and starts complaining about someone else, say, okay, time out. Have you spoken with them about this? And if they haven't, if all you get is crickets, then you say, well, please go do that. And I hold you able to have a great conversation with that person. So, let me know when you had it. I'm really expecting to hear that you had it and that you guys worked things out and that you're back on track. And so if that kind of thing happens in my own company where we're all about the conversations and we teach feedback and we weren't using it ourselves, then it's called being human. It's you can't be angry with anybody or slipping into that trap. It is human nature, but it's definitely toxic, and it's very toxic to a culture. Um, it stops us right dead in our tracks when you realize that people are not having the conversations that want and need to take place. People are either avoiding them altogether or they're being very careful. And I think a careful conversation is usually a failed conversation because it merely postpones the conversation that wants and needs to take place.
Huh.
So I
How do
also
you
think
how do you
what
get how do you get comfortable with
do it
with the discomfort?
by doing it, um, by practicing it. We're always practicing something. The question is, what are we practicing? Are we practicing withholding what we're really thinking and feeling? Or are we practicing disclosing what we're really thinking and feeling and asking questions? And so that's the only way it's going to happen. And people, if you watch the TEDx talk, you'll see what I mean about why we don't. I mean, there's terror for many people when they think about going to someone and bringing up something that they think is off or wrong or troublesome. There's really great fear, and it's understandable. So we can't beat people up for that. But when we give them here's the tool, here's the skill, there is skill in going to someone and saying, here's what I witnessed, here's what I experienced. Stop. Can you tell me what was going on or what is going on? And ask questions. And really, Jeff, that is the one thing. Ask, ask, ask. Catch yourself in the act of making up stories
Mm.
about other people. Catch yourself when you go to somebody else and are complaining about another person, and stop it. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anybody. And yet, oh, I know there's a certain juice in doing that. But really, it doesn't. The cost is so high. So that's what I want to leave with everybody is just catch yourself in the act of making up a story. Catch yourself in the act of complaining to others. Don't go out and buy a bunch of psychedelic mushrooms. Just go have the conversation, and That's really what I wanted to say today. That's the main point I wanted to make, and take any questions anybody has.
Yeah, I love that. One of the questions came in with, they say, I really agree about the importance of the conversations, but what do you do if you find yourself in this situation where you want to have the conversation, but the other person may not be interested?
Yeah, and that happens all the time. That is a question that I hear all the time because it's so prevalent. Um, that's when you really, I would hope that you would screw your courage to the sticking place, as Shakespeare would say, and go to that person and say, I know you don't want to talk about this. In fact, I was talking with the head of HR for a very large company who um, wanted my advice on how to talk with someone over her,
Mm.
um, because there was a topic that she felt was really important, and he would get angry when anybody would bring that topic up. And she said, what do I do? And I said, well, I use humor to get through tough things. I'm from the South, and that's what we do. I would suggest going to him and say, I'm going to bring up a topic that you don't want me to bring up. And so if you're packing today, please don't shoot me. Don't shoot me. I wouldn't be here quaking in my boots if I didn't feel this was really important, and that there's a lot at stake to lose and a lot at stake to gain, depending on how we resolve this. Something like that. Most people are going to say, all right. But if they don't, you got a bigger problem. Then, I mean, there are people who are never, ever going to welcome a fierce conversation, a real conversation. They go into anger, which of course means that there's fear for them somewhere. Maybe they're afraid they're going to lose this relationship. Maybe they're afraid they're going to be seen not to be as magnificent as they want everybody to think they are, whatever. There's usually some fear there. So sometimes humor can disarm that kind of fear. But if it doesn't, you might say, well, okay, you're still not willing to have that conversation, and I can see you're really upset, you're angry. Here's the thing, I'm going to leave you in peace for now, but I'm pitching my tent on this issue because it is that important. And here's what I feel is at stake. Bullet, 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 and have thought of those before you go into this conversation. Here are the prices I think we will pay if we can't deal with this. Bullet, 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 bullet. So I'm going to leave you with that right now and circle back to you another day, or you can come to me. Just know that I'm not going to give up because this matters. This matters a great deal. And leave. And if the person still, after repeated attempts, won't engage with you, then probably you should leave. Um, you know, you can only do so much, and some people are too terrified to really be real, or to have conversations where there's going to be discomfort. There might be anger, there might be tears, there might be accusations. Um, I want to talk with you about the things about you that I'm struggling with, and you're probably going to come back at me with all the things that you think are wrong with me. And you're probably right about some or all of those things. That's not pleasant. And yet, when you think about if nothing, here's the question to ask yourself and ask the other person or persons: if nothing changes, what is likely to occur?
Mm.
So, personally, it could be a divorce. Professionally, it could be success, um, the lack of success, the loss of a job, the loss of a promotion, the loss of a client. It could be a whole bunch of things. So I would think about those and have those in your head when you go in, if to the person who flat out does not want to have the conversation.
Do you find that there's a difference in the way that men versus women interpret things, and how do you account for that in these conversations?
That's a tough one for me. I think some people would say yes. But I worked primarily with male CEOs for 13 years. Um, I mean, it was always lovely when I had a female CEO because there was no explaining that we needed, we got each other completely. But I found that the the male CEOs were just as terrified of having some of the conversations as anybody else would be. Um, so I think the lack of courage really is at the heart of these issues. And I don't think women or men are more courageous than the other. I think this is a human problem. I think where women can get in trouble is they're processing out loud too many words. Some women too many words. They haven't really thought it through, and they go in and they start. Here's I'm unhappy about this. Blah 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 blah. And pretty soon the person feels like their hair is blowing back, and this isn't really a conversation. I'm just shooting at me, or I don't even understand what your point is, or what are you trying to say, or what are you asking? This is too much. So I think that's an error that some women can make, and another error that women can make is try to be like what they think a man would do, and you just have to be yourself. You just have to be yourself and
Yeah.
do things your own way. I mean, don't try to be somebody else or what you think you're supposed to be. And here, one of the tough things is my life got a whole lot better when I stopped caring what other people thought of me. and just cared about what I thought of me, and sticking to what I hold as important, so that my own immune system is strong because my actions are in alignment with what I say that I believe. And so if I'm for having real conversations, um, then I that's what I need to do. And sometimes that's difficult. When you and I were talking earlier, Jeff, you reminded me about somebody that I was coaching for a while. And this was a man who, I spent almost a full day with him, and then I was going to have a few more hours the next day before I returned to Seattle. And when I went in the next day, I brought with me a bar of Ivory soap. And I said, I have a gift for you, and I would love for you to keep this on your desk because there's something about you, and I can't put my finger on it yet, but I think you need to be reminded to stay clean because I just get sort of there's something slick about you that causes me to have some questions about what's really going on. And I'm absolutely prepared to be wrong about that. I hope I am. But this bar of soap is just to remind you to be clean in everything that you do. And several years later, he was fired, because he had not been clean in everything that he did, and he was found out.
Hmm.
And I was very sad, so sad, because you know, even people who have major flaws, we can still love them, we can still care about them, we can still want them, all good things for them. And I was really, really sad to hear that. But I had not talked with him in years, so I really didn't know what was going on. And no one in his company wanted to spell it out for me, although I got enough hints that I kind of figured it out. But the thing is, I want to be clean, and I want to be clean in my conversations and in my relationships. I do know that my most valuable currency is relationship, personally and professionally. And I know that though every conversation needs to further and enrich a relationship,
Hmm.
even if it is a tough one. And I find that when we give feedback using our model, and I've only just given you the opening gambit of our model, there's much more to it. But when I say, and I could even say, I've told, this is what I saw, and I realized I'm telling myself a story about that that may or may not be true. Can you tell me what was going on? When we do that, we're not harming the relationship. The person might be startled, they might be surprised, they might say, oh wow, no, no, no. I mean, one other example was and I wrote about this in Fierce Conversations, a CEO who I would always meet with him on Mondays, and he always looked like hell. I mean, he just, and he would talk about partying over the weekend. And I remember finally saying to him one day, I'm just wondering, because of all of the broken blood vessels in your nose, and because of how you seem to feel every Monday morning when I show up for our monthly one-to-one, I'm wondering if you have a drinking problem. And I'm terrified to say that out loud, but I did because I care about you. And he was angry. How dare you? How dare you? Why would you think that? Blah, 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 blah. And the very next month, when I came in and I asked him, what is the most important thing we should be talking about? He said, my drinking problem. So it's very often that the first comment won't land. There will be that denial. And that's true for me. When somebody's telling me something about myself, I might not recognize, oh no, I don't do that. I'm not thinking that. I'm not behaving that way. And then later on, I'm thinking, you know what? I think I am. I think there is something to that. It's very humbling and very useful. It's so useful. And that's when we always say, when somebody tells you something that was difficult, you always say, thank you for saying that, because that took guts. I know that was hard to say, and it's hard for me to hear. So thank you. I want to, and maybe I want to think about it. Let me sit on that. I don't recognize that in myself right now, but there may be something to it. Is there anything else that can you give me more examples? Whatever. But to really be grateful when honest feedback is shared. And I don't like when people say brutal feedback. There's nothing brutal about Fierce. It always comes from a place of caring and support. So that's what I would recommend for everyone: is catch yourself, stop yourself, ask. Here's what I saw. Here's what I experienced. Can you tell me what was going on? And then
Dive in.
ask and ask.
Dive in there, because Sue asked a question. You said, catch yourself, stop yourself, ask.
Yes.
Think back to your journey. What's the one thing you did that allowed you to begin catching yourself, to create that awareness?
Well, I got some feedback when I was in my early 30s, and I had become a manager, and somebody gave me the feedback. Your message is almost always right on, but your delivery leaves a lot to be desired. Harsh. It can be hurtful. And in fact, one person had said she would never forget what I had said to her, and I didn't remember saying anything to her that could be like that bad. And at first I thought, well, look, if I'm too strong for some people, that's their problem. And it was only when I realized, after a series of disappointing results, the constant was me, that there's got to be something to this. And that's why one of the principles of Fierce Conversations is take responsibility for your emotional wake. Because we always leave a wake. It could be positive, it could be an afterglow, it could be an aftermath, it could be terrible, but we always leave a wake. So I need to take responsibility for it, even how I respond to someone who's criticizing me, and how I bring to someone's attention something that I think is off for them. So I'm always leaving awake. And that's not to say that everyone is going to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so grateful for this feedback. Probably not. And yet, in your heart of hearts, it would be useful. So for me, I had to come to terms with the fact that this was not about other people. This is about me. And I remember throwing the I Ching years ago and getting the message in a very real sense. The progress of the world depends on your progress as an individual now.
Hmm.
Thinking, well, that's heavy. And then I thought, and it's true. And I think for all of us, the progress of our organization, the progress of our department, the progress of our family, of our marriage, depends on my progress as an individual now. I can't leave it up to other people. If only they would be a certain way, if only they would help me with this, if only they would approach me this way, if only, if only, if only. And waiting for somebody else to show the way and model the perfect behavior, it could be a very long wait. So I do think something else to consider is, look, this is not about other people. This is about you. This is about me and how we show up every single day in every conversation that we have. And again, I want to emphasize it's the missing conversations that are the most costly because things are not going to change. And maybe
Yeah.
they don't, we need to, but they're not going to change if we don't have that conversation.
And we know for those of you who are listening to this, oftentimes the thing that stops you from having it is either knowing how to have it or a lack of comfort around having it. And
Yeah.
when Kaylin and I were having a conversation, out of curiosity, how many of you are aware of the Productive Summit that we're going to be doing this year? If so, put me in the questions box. You know, our one thing was to really build community around the one thing. And part of that was how do we create experiences where the community can literally get in the same room. And we started doing the couples goal setting retreat in the fall, and we realized there was a need to do one mid-year, which the Productive Summit is going to be that. And we asked the question, how do we start to feature other people? How do we start to bring together more voices that can help you as an individual progress and advance? And this year, we asked the question, if we could only invite one person to come that was not just Jeff and Jay, who would it be? You're staring at her. So this is
And we're going to practice what I've been talking about. And when we
yeah.
are all together so that we get good at it and we'll go deeper into the topic.
Yeah, so we asked the question, how do we, if the conversation is the relationship, what's one thing we can do so that you grow your comfort there, that you have the framework and the model, which is going to be the feedback model, and you are going to get the chance to work with Susan in person. So we are very excited for that. And we want to let you know, we'll share the URL for you to learn about it. It's theonething.com. That's with the number one in the URL, theonething.com/summit fierce. And I'm even going to share my screen real quick so you can see it. You will see that it is currently scheduled for the end of May in Seattle. Now, obviously, there's something going on in the country right now with the virus, and so there is a possibility that that date does get pushed back. But the thing that we wanted to do for people who are here on this webinar, we understand that the date may move. We wanted to offer you a chance to join us and to join Susan and to give you an incentive to do it. You'll see on there will be a coupon code. If you just enter the code FIERCE in the coupon code spot, you will get $100 off your ticket. And we're only leaving that up for the next 48 hours just because this is not going to be distributed to the public at this time. So we were going to be pulling that down in the next 48 hours, but we wanted to invite you and to give you the chance to join us. And if we do end up needing to move the event because you are our one thing and the dates do not align with your schedule, we will 100% refund your money, no questions asked. But we wanted to make that available for you guys now. So I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this or open up a browser real quick and put down theonething.com/summit fierce. That is a special page just for you guys. Use the coupon code FIERCE and you'll get $100 off.
That's a great offer. That's really nice.
Thanks. Well, we care. We care.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Susan, I'm curious if you think about your journey
Hmm.
as a practice leader of Fierce,
Yep.
what advice would you give that version of yourself when you were just starting?
Oh, boy.
Today, what would you
Yeah.
tell yourself to start doing that you weren't doing at the time?
I would s- I would tell myself to disclose what I'm really thinking and feeling because I
Mm,
cannot do that. And also, I was so terrified of disclosing what I was thinking and feeling that whenever I dipped my toe into that water, it didn't go well because my fear came out as anger, which is not fun for anybody, you know. And so I withheld a lot of what I was thinking and feeling, not so much at work, but at home. And and I know that my husband did as well. And I think that that's what tanked our marriage after many, many years. That was really hard to make that decision, but we were not having the conversations that we needed to have. And it was shortly after that that the whole idea of fierce conversations came to me, and I began to work wholeheartedly on that and found out that I am not the only person on this planet who longs to have meaningful, productive conversations that help us interrogate reality and provoke learning and tackle our tough challenges and enrich relationships. So I would advise myself, just say it. Just say it. I know it seems risky, but just say it or ask a question. So
yeah,
I was more into talking than asking at that point, which was another problem.
hmm, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, folks, I would love to open it up to you. Out of everything we have covered on here, what's the one thing that brought the most value to you? Put your answers in the questions box. We would love to see it. Out of everything that we covered today, what is the one thing that brought the most value to you? Take responsibility. This one. I love that. I love what you said, Susan, about the progress of the world depends on the progress that you make right now. It just,
Hmm. Yeah.
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 Sue
Not
says,
tomorrow or next
yep,
month. When
yep.
you're in the mood for it, now.
Sue says awareness around my stories and how they determine how the conversation goes. Have the conversation, that the conversation is the relationship. Take responsibility for your emotional wake. Yep, that was a good gut check for me as well. Make yourself aware of the story that you're creating.
Yeah.
Ask more questions. If nothing changes, what is likely to occur?
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Hmm, very nice. Be brave. Missing conversations are what cause the most damage. Yep.
Yeah.
Hearing Susan say, disclose what I feel and think. Very
Hmm.
good. Thank you, folks. You know, the,
Oh, glad. I'm
oh,
so glad. Hello, everybody. I wish you were all here with me in the treehouse, although you wouldn't fit. But I wish you were here. I wish we could go build a campfire. And I just, I shared with somebody the other day that when I think of a fierce conversation, my image is of a campfire. And I find that when I'm here on the island and friends and family are around, all I have to do is start a campfire, and pretty soon everybody starts showing up because they smell the smoke and they hear the crackle and they're attracted to the warmth, and then they'll add their logs to the fire, and pretty soon we have got an amazing crackling blaze going. And that's where we gather to tell our stories and be with one another. And that's exactly what happens when someone comes out from behind themselves into a conversation and makes it real. Then somebody else will say, well, I think I can be a little more real in this conversation too. And that person joins, and then somebody else joins, and somebody else joins. And we discover that we are having a conversation unlike any that we have had before, and that it is very useful. and heartwarming. And we also start to see one another so much more clearly and understand one another and learn from one another. So
Yeah,
think campfire and
I love
s'more.
I love it. I love it. Well, Susan, we really appreciate you investing your time with us today. We are very excited to get to work with you in person at the summit, whether it ends up being at the end of May or during the summer throughout this year. And if people wanted to find out more about Fierce Conversations, Fierce Leadership, where do they go?
Well, they can certainly go to our website, which is fierceinc.com. There's a lot there. And and just send us an email or ask for a chat, or we have a lot, and everybody's working remote, but we still are getting people's emails and messages, and I would love to hear from you if there's anything that we can do to help.
Yeah, and I'll put this slide up one more time, folks. So if you would like the chance to join Susan, Jay, Kaylin, myself in person, we will be doing a summit this year. The question is a matter of when. Right now, it is slated for the end of May. There's a chance we do move it, and if we do shift the date and it does not work with your schedule, we will 100% refund your investment. But we wanted to give you guys a special offer to be able to join us in person and get $100 off. So please take a screenshot of this. That
That's
will be
cool.
up. Yeah.
And I also would say, if I know a lot of people have read Fierce Conversations, but if you haven't read Fierce Leadership, that goes much deeper into this incredible territory.
Yeah. Well, Susan, thank you so much for investing your time with us. And for everybody here, this will go out on the One Thing podcast later. Next month for April, we have Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First, who will be joining us. So we will include that in the email to follow up, and you are more than welcome to register for that as well. In the meantime, we hope that you have a productive day. Have a good one.
Bye.
Could you hear?